Hi everyone, welcome. Today's Facebook Live is going to be about baby's first beauty appointment. I'm Melissa Gersin. I am the founder and CEO of Tranquilo Mat, and I am also a maternity nurse. I have about 6 years experience in various Boston area hospitals. I've been working at some of the big ones here in the city for quite a while, so I'm here to kind of share everything you need to know regarding baby's first PD appointment. So this live is actually going to cover, just so you know, once baby's discharged from the hospital, their first several appointments up until about their 3 months of age. I did create a blog for this content, as well as everything you're going to need to know when baby's in the hospital and all the health checks they're going to be getting there. So I'm excited to have you guys tune in. If you're just tuning in and you can hear me, I would love if you could give me a thumbs up, a heart, share with any mamas out there who are expecting or soon to have a baby. This content is going to be just for them. And before we get started, I also wanted to encourage folks to follow Tranquilo so that you get notified when we go live, but as well as we're going to be doing a huge giveaway. So you're going to want to be following. So it's super simple. Just click the button under the cover photo on our Facebook page and click follow, and then make sure that notifications are turned on by going right back to that same spot and hovering over, and you'll see whether your notifications are turned on. Again, you're not going to want to miss it. You're going to want to follow us. You're going to want to hear about notifications, because we have a very, very big, huge giveaway coming up where it's going to be 2 winners. Somebody's going to get one, and then we're going to give one. So you're going to get to nominate a mom in need and $14,000 worth of products. So you're not going to want to miss it. Again, you're going to want to follow Tranquilo by going under our cover photo, selecting follow, and then hovering over again and making sure notifications are on, because we're going to do a live for that giveaway, and it's going to be huge. You're not going to want to miss it. Tons and tons of brands. I think it's like 40 plus brands are contributing, and it's $14,000 worth of prizes. So everything for baby you're going to want to get. It's all there: cribs, car seats, strollers, the whole nine. You're going to want to hear about notifications. So now that that's out of the way, again, we're going to be talking about baby's first PD appointment today. And as a maternity nurse, I know all about this. I would be in the hospital helping moms, making sure baby was okay right after delivery, and then getting you all set up with your first several appointments with the pediatrician. So I'm going to be sharing that content with y'all today. So one of the first things before we get started in on what to expect at that first appointment is kind of the preparation and kind of talking a little bit about before baby arrives. So obviously finding a pediatrician, that's something you're doing while you're pregnant. You're going to be looking for somebody who's close to maybe where you work, maybe where daycare is going to be, where your house is. And you're also going to look at the practice. Is it one provider? Is it multiple providers? Kind of what's their policy on sick appointments? How easy is it to get an appointment, but also the philosophy, right? So there's a lot of different philosophies on raising kids, and if you have one particular philosophy and your pediatrician is absolutely against it, let's say they're really pushing bottle feeding for some reason, I know that's super old school, and you want to breastfeed, probably not going to be the right pediatrician for you. So make sure you're asking them questions and making sure that their kind of values align with your values. And this is going to be somebody that you trust, because that's what you're going to want. This is a team. And your pediatrician is on your team, so you want to make sure that you have the same values and you both have the same kind of end goal in mind, and the right way to get there. We don't want we don't want the pediatrician being exactly opposite of what you guys plan to do. So if you want to, co-sleep and your pediatrician is dead set against it, might not be the right pediatrician for you. So make sure that you're selecting the pediatrician correctly for your baby. The other thing that you're going to want to know, and you're going to want to know this because the hospital will ask you this when you arrive, does your pediatrician have rights, quote unquote, at that hospital? Can your pediatrician at the, your office pediatrician come see the baby in the hospital? That isn't something you're going to want to select your pediatrician for, but it is something you're going to want to know, because the hospital's going to want to know, okay, are we going to have the staff pediatrician who's going to be rounding on this baby while they're here in the hospital for a few days, or should we wait, only emergency type stuff where the pediatrician here is seeing them, but like for their full assessment that the doctor, your normal pediatrician, will meet them kind of the morning after delivery and do the full assessment. So the hospital is going to want to ask that question. So you just want to know, it's like I said, not a big deal, nothing you're going to want to pick your pediatrician off of, but it's something that you want to note and tell labor and delivery nurses and staff when you arrive. So yeah. So then for that first pediatrician appointment, I have a few general tips before we get into exactly what to expect. So one of the biggest tips that I tell all moms that are leaving the hospital is it's going to take a long time to get out of the house. That first time you are getting out of the house with a baby, you just don't, you thought when you were pregnant, it took you a long time to get out of the house because you had to pee every 2 seconds. And, that pair of jeans that were maternity were fitting for the whole trimesters, and now all of a sudden isn't. It's taking you forever when you're pregnant to get out of the house, and yet when you have a baby, it somehow takes you like 3 times more amount of time to get out of the house. So any moms out there who have had kids, maybe you're expecting number 2, or just you've had kids before and you're tuning in to hear the content and sharing with some of your friends. If you've experienced that, trying to get out of the house with a newborn, go ahead and give me a heart or a like. It's definitely something that new moms don't quite understand. They think that, it used to take me an hour to get ready in the morning, so I'll leave myself 2 hours. No, you need like 5 hours. I know that seems ridiculous, but it truly is how much time you're going to need. That's because babies seem to like go on their own schedule. They always seem to know that they're fully dressed. You've fed them, you've changed their diaper, you've put them in their car seat. They have a massive blowout diaper. You've got to change their diaper again. By the time you're done changing their diaper, their outfit's soiled, so you've got to change that. And now they're hungry again. And so you're right back to where you started. You're no closer to getting out of the house. So even seasoned moms with a new baby trying to get out of the house by 10 a.m. Can truly be a challenge. And so I really recommend for moms not trying to schedule yourself for an early morning appointment with the pediatrician. Try to get a late morning, like an 11 a.m. or an afternoon appointment with baby. It's going to be way easier to get out of the house that way for the first time. So keep that in mind. Plan, like I said, about 5 times more amount of time than you think you're going to need to get out of the house with a newborn. One of the other things, and this is obvious when it's happening, but it's not always obvious when you're pregnant. You're like, oh, it'll be fine. My partner's going back to work pretty soon, or, I'm going to go to the appointment by myself. No, you're going to want to go with somebody else, whether it's a family, like I said, it's your partner, if your mom's in town helping you with the baby, maybe a sister who might want to come with you, but somebody should come with you to that appointment for 2 reasons. The first reason is that when you deliver, sometimes if you've had a C-section or if you have any kind of stitches, let's say you had a vaginal delivery, but you have some stitches, you might not be able to drive. And this appointment usually occurs around 3 to 5 days after discharge from the hospital. So sometimes you're just not able to drive at that point. So you're going to need a ride there. The second reason why I recommend that moms bring somebody with them with baby is that you're going to want another set of eyes and ears because you're going to have questions. You're going to forget your questions. You're going to get wrapped up. The pediatrician might be telling you all sorts of things that are going on, and you have no idea, like you're trying to absorb all this information and you just can't. So you're going to want another person there to help you, to remind you of the questions that you had, to ask those questions, or again, to just listen to all the information that the pediatrician is trying to tell you. So that's really important, to try to bring another person with you to that appointment. The other thing that's another little tip is doctors' offices. This is going back to when you are scoping out your pediatrician's office. So a lot of the offices have one waiting area. So that means that sick kids, anywhere from newborn, upwards of the preteen, teen years, could be in that waiting area along with your newborn. Some places do have separate, like well visit versus sick visit. Would certainly be interested to hear if anyone out there has one of those. They're one of the lucky few whose pediatrician has 2 separate waiting areas. But if your pediatrician has one waiting area and you get there early, because remember I just told you to leave a lot of extra time, then I would make sure that when you get there, hang out in your car for a little bit. Hang out with baby in the back seat, just chill in the car. Don't go into the appointment right away. Maybe go in 5 to 10 minutes before the appointment to fill in any paperwork. If they've they've requested that. Otherwise, show up just a few minutes before your appointment, but, you know, sit in the parking lot, hang out, chill out, and don't go in there because your baby is still new. Yes, they've got a lot of antibodies from breast milk if you're breastfeeding, but these babies don't really have a great immune system right yet. And so the last thing you want to do is show up to that appointment and have your kiddo get sick with some germs of some kid who's got the flu in there. So especially flu season, that's really important to remember. So just wanted to give that as another little tip. One of the other things that I wanted to recommend as a general rule is that you're going to want to write down all of your questions. I know it's only a few days after you've left the hospital that you're going to this appointment, but you're going to forget so much. You're going to be sleep deprived. You're going to be still trying to remember how to bathe baby and breastfeed baby and just so many things going on all at that time. You're going to forget a lot of what you wanted to remember. Mommy brain is what people call it. A lot of people don't think it's a real thing. Any moms out there who know it's a real thing would love if you gave me a heart, because I know it's a thing. And y'all, I had one of my coworkers, when she was pregnant, she was like, oh, I keep forgetting things. I can't wait till the baby's here so I can stop forgetting things. And I was like, oh no, that like it doubles when you're a mom. So that mommy brain that starts when you're pregnant continues. So you're going to want to write down a lot of your questions. And you're also going to want to keep track of any diapers that baby's having. So they're having a wet diaper, a poopy diaper, how many diapers per day of each category you're going to want to write down. That's important for baby's overall health. And then it's really helpful to write down how much you're feeding. If it's a bottle, you're going to write down the exact amount, or if it's breastfeeding, the time. Okay, we breastfed for 30 minutes, 20 minutes on the right side, 10 minutes on the left. And you keep track of that with feedings because the doctor's going to ask. It's going to be important, like I said, those first few days and that first week, that visit is really about checking in to make sure baby is transitioning well, is eating well, and is doing well at home. And those are kind of the top signs and things that the pediatrician is going to be looking out for. So come prepared. There are tons of apps out there that you can use. So feel free to go into the app store, whether it's the Android or the ISO, the Apple App Store, and just go in there and check it out. There's a ton of them out there. I don't have a particular favorite. I always prefer to try the free ones first, and if I really like something, or if I can't find what I need in a free version, then I'll pay for something. But tons and tons of apps out there for tracking babies' feedings and diapers and things like that. So you're going to want to have that with you when you go to the pediatrician appointment. The other thing that I want to tell you about, again, going back to that whole your pediatrician's on your team thing, is that you want to be able to trust your pediatrician with anything that's going on with you as it relates to baby. So maybe you're feeling really down and blue after baby's been born. Postpartum depression is something that's pretty common and can happen. And so you want to be able to feel comfortable mentioning that to your pediatrician. They are on your team. They can often help you with the resources that you need for, whether it's a postpartum depression, or let's say you've got cracked, bleeding nipples from breastfeeding. They can hook you up with a lactation consultant appointment and things like that. And all of this obviously relates to baby because if you're not well, it's going to be more difficult to care for baby. So make sure that you can trust that pediatrician, and don't be afraid to. You're going to get to know this person. You're going to see them so much this first year or two of baby's life. Again, any moms out there who know this, who, you probably feel like you're besties with your pediatrician at this point in the whole office. Like, the nurse, the receptionist, the whole nine. So again, feel comfortable, feel free. They are part of your team. They are advocates for you as well. So don't be afraid to do that. And also for partners out there. So if you're a dad or a wife out there and you're watching and your partner's, having the baby, you can feel free to mention these things as well about your partner to the pediatrician if you're worried or concerned about anything. So another reason to have those eyes and ears, second set of eyes and ears at that appointment. The last little general tip that I provide people with is that the entire staff is on your team. So again, you're going to want to get to know who the nurse is, the receptionist, try to remember their names, know their names, because these people are going to help you. Let's say you're going to be late for an appointment, or you need to reschedule, or you need a sick appointment and you need to be squeezed in so that it works with work. If you've got that nurse or you've got that receptionist on your side, it's going to be way easier to be getting things done for you and your baby. So this is an entire team. A little bit, as a nurse, I can tell you that a little bit goes a long way. If you remember their name, maybe get them a little gift card as a thank you for Christmas, or you know, something like maybe their birthday, something like that. But it can really help get you and your baby what you need. The nurse especially can be really helpful in answering a lot of questions. Let's say you've seen the pediatrician, they've answered your questions, you get home, 2 seconds later you remember 12 more questions that you have. That nurse is usually the one who takes that call and can help answer those questions for you. So it's really great to have them as an entire team for that whole staff. There might be multiple nurses, multiple receptionists. The more you can do to know who else is in that office and is helping the pediatrician get everything done, you know, schedule lab appointments, things like that, is going to really help you and create a really safe and great environment to make sure your baby's healthy. So those are kind of my tips and tricks for general tips and tricks for that first pediatrician appointment, and in general those first few months of going to the pediatrician like every other week with baby. It's not quite that much, but it is a lot. So that being said, what can you expect at that first visit? Again, that first visit is usually 3 to 5 days after you've been discharged from the hospital. Sometimes it can be as soon as the next day or 2 days after. That'll depend on what goes on with baby in the hospital. So if you want to know kind of what baby's being assessed for in the hospital and what everyone's looking for, the nurses and the doctors are you know, looking and checking in on your baby constantly. I did write a blog as well that goes with this Facebook Live, so there's a lot of content there as well. So depending on, again, when, you know, how baby was doing in the hospital, maybe they're really jaundiced, then might be something where you're going to be seeing the pediatrician sooner rather than later. So it might be 2 days after you've been sent home from the hospital. So keep that in mind. You're going to be seeing your pediatrician pretty quickly thereafter. And especially if your pediatrician didn't see the baby in the hospital, they're probably going to want to meet the baby in those first few days versus, you know, so if your doctor had rights, as I mentioned before, to go into the hospital and see baby, they might wait those 3 to 5 days. But yeah, so what is going to happen at this appointment? So the biggest thing is going to be checking on baby's weight. They're going to redo all the numbers they did in the hospital. What did baby weigh? What does baby weigh now? What is their length? What is their head circumference? I know that seems like, well, the length shouldn't change really in a couple of days, and it doesn't, but they're going to want to make sure that they have their own heights on, you know, on record. On occasion, there can be slight variations. So it is something where, you know, I've measured a baby and I give him an extra 1/4 of an inch more than my colleague might. So your pediatrician is going to do that as a baseline, and also check the baby's head circumference as well as weight. So obviously they're born at a certain weight, and babies lose a little bit of weight until your milk comes in if you're breastfeeding, or even if you're bottle feeding, they do lose a little bit of weight. That meconium that they're pooping out in those first few days actually is relatively heavy by comparison. And so they do lose a little bit of weight in those first few days. So they're going to be checking the weight, making sure that it's coming up, especially if you're breastfeeding. When your milk's in, they want to make sure that baby's weight's kind of getting back to their birth weight or not continuing to decrease. So that's kind of the main thing. And they're also going to be checking, again, going back to the weight, is their feedings as well as their diapers. So I mentioned they're going to want to know how many wet diapers, how many poopy diapers per day, how often you're feeding, how long baby's feeding for if you're breastfeeding, or how many ounces baby is taking when you know you're bottle feeding. So these are things they're going to want to know, so come prepared with that information. They're also likely going to check baby's bilirubin levels. So that is their jaundice levels essentially. So they're going to check on baby's jaundice levels, make sure that baby is, you know, not too jaundice. We talked about jaundice in a few other lives. I have a few blogs up on our site as well. So there's a ton of content that we've provided about jaundice. So they're going to be checking for the jaundice levels. Usually it's just they like shine a light like through the skin, and then it bounces off their bone and hits, like goes back into the machine and reads how much yellow. It's like a little red light. It's a very non-invasive way to check jaundice levels. And usually if that's fine or has trended down from where it has been in the hospital, they don't necessarily need to do a blood draw. They might do a blood draw, especially if your baby's had issues with their jaundice levels in the hospital. They will likely do a lab draw or blood draw, and that's usually done by pricking the baby's heel and getting blood from their heel. So It's not necessarily like a needle prick or anything like that. It's more like a paper cut is kind of how we get baby's blood for jaundice levels. But that's something the doctor is going to be checking because, again, baby, as they're pooping out that bilirubin, there's usually a backup of kind of the bilirubin and the bile, and so they're checking that to make sure that the jaundice, so all babies get jaundice, it goes from head to toe, and that it's improving. So those first few days, almost all babies become jaundiced, and it gets a little bit worse before it gets better, but they're going to be making sure that it is getting better. One of the other things that they may do, if it wasn't already done in the hospital, is a newborn screen. These are mandatory, and it's a screening test. Again, they take a heel prick, and they get blood drawn. Baby gets blood drawn that way, and it's actually sent off to your state, and it's tested for a whole host of different diseases that, if caught early, can be easily treated. So those are things that you're going to want to, make sure that either the baby got it done in the hospital, you can defer it to that first appointment, but other than that, it has to be done, and it screens for things like sickle cell anemia, this thing called maple syrup disease. There's all sorts of cystic fibrosis is another one that they test for within that screening. And they're things that, like, if found, can very easily be treated. And so it's something that you're going to want to know about. And so it's a mandatory thing. You cannot decline it. It'll either happen at the hospital or at this first visit. And then one of the other things that can happen at the hospital, that either at the hospital or at this first visit, is baby's first hepatitis B vaccination. It's a series of 3 vaccinations. So they'll get 3 doses over the course of several months. And so if it was done at the hospital, then it won't need to be done again until your 1 month visit, or if it wasn't done in the hospital, it'll be done now for the first vaccination. So there's tons of information out there. I would just recommend folks go to the CDC website, and you can get information about that vaccination, or talk to your pediatrician. Hepatitis B is a virus that can cause, like, liver problems and long-term damage. So it's something, and it's pretty easily transmitted between folks. So it's something that you're going to want to vaccinate your child for. So keep an eye out for that. And then for the 1 month visit, so the next time, so now you've seen the pediatrician for the first visit, you're going to see a pediatrician again for their 1 month visit. And that visit, they're also going to check, their growth, their height, their weight, how are they feeding, how many diapers are they having, and also milestones. Last week we just wrapped up 2-part series on milestones, and those can be physical or cognitive milestones, but the various things like crawling or saying their first word. So your pediatrician is going to be checking on those milestones, and are they happening? The other thing at that first month visit that your pediatrician will share with you is, or you might do, is also that second hepatitis B vaccination. So again, if you got it in the hospital, you'll likely be getting the baby will be getting second dose of hepatitis B. And then some doctor's offices require a TB test for tuberculosis. So that's similar to the little one where they do a little prick under your skin, and it can, like, if it becomes a raised bubble or red, usually on your forearm, then that's a sign of that you've been exposed to tuberculosis. And so that's something that some pediatricians will do for babies, especially if there's any high risk situations. So that's something else you might see at one of your first pediatrician appointments. Then, as if you haven't seen the pediatrician enough, right? You've just seen them twice in a month. Now you're seeing them again 1 month later for baby's 2-month visit. So at this visit, again, they're checking on growth, they're checking height and weight and feedings and diapers, as well as those milestones. And then this visit is a really big visit for vaccination. There's a ton of vaccinations that baby could get at this visit. So they might get their second hepatitis B vaccination if they didn't get it in their first month visit. This is probably because they're already getting so many vaccines. Might be a good but good reason to get that hepatitis B vaccination in the hospital, and then at your 1 month visit. So you're staving off at least one, needle prick for baby. Another one is a rotavirus that can cause nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea in small children and babies, and can be very serious for babies. So they're going to be getting that vaccination. They're going to be getting the DTaP or the DTaP, which is diphtheria. pertussis is the other one. I'm trying to think of the T. It'll come to me in a second. I'm used to, the adults get the Tdap. You probably got that while you were pregnant. Totally blanking on what the T stands for. My bad. It'll come to me. I'll stop this live and it'll come to me. So, yeah, so they're getting that vaccination. As well as the Hib, which is for influenza. It's a certain type of influenza B that can be very dangerous for small children and babies, as well as a pneumococcal vaccination and the inactivated polio vaccination. So there's a lot of vaccines that your kid's going to be due for at their 2-month visit. And so talk to your doctor about what that is, and be prepared for that. Some of them can be combined into the same syringe and given at the same time. Tetanus, that's it. The DTaP is diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. So obviously we all know tetanus is bad, and so that's the first round. And a lot of these are multiple, like they'll need multiple doses. So, and again, you can draw a lot of them up in the same syringe, but it still means multiple pricks for baby and multiple needle jabs. So it's definitely something to be prepared for. And often a lot of moms will tell you their baby is fussy after that appointment, because, they've just gotten a bunch of vaccines. Now their immune system is working overtime, to make sure that they're covered from these vaccines, which is great. So they're not going to come down with pertussis, which is the whooping cough, or, tetanus, or hepatitis B, or pneumonia, or anything like that. But they get kind of just like sleepy and cranky, and it can be a little bit of a rough day or two after. So if at all possible, if you're a working mom, maybe you have that appointment on a Friday or a Thursday, so you can take a long weekend so that you can be around and be with baby when they're fussy. Or maybe not. Maybe you plan it so that it's a morning appointment and you take them to daycare right after, and somebody else is dealing with your fussy baby for the first few hours. No, just kidding, of course. Some of the other things that I want to go over, especially regarding vaccinations, is what to watch out for. So you're going to be at the pediatrician for that first visit, your 1-month visit, your 2-month visit, and then you see them again for like the 4-month visit, 6-month visit, 9-month visit, 12-month visit, 15-month visit, 18-month visit, and then the 24-month visit. So you're seeing your doctor pretty much it starts every month, and then it's like every 2 months, and then it's every 3 months, and then it moves to every 4 months. But you're seeing your doctor a lot during that first 2 years of baby's life. In addition to that, though, your kid's probably going to get sick at some point, especially if your kid goes to daycare, you have mommy groups and they're playing. I mean, this is what they're supposed to do. They're getting into all these germs and they're building a healthy immune system. So some of the things you're going to want to look out for, general things, anytime baby has a fever over 100.4 Fahrenheit, anytime they're vomiting, which is spitting up an entire feeding as opposed to just spitting up, which is a little bit, like a little dribble or two of a feeding. Vomiting is like throwing up their entire meal. If they've got diarrhea more than once, so one diarrhea, which is a totally liquid poop, no solid parts, no seeds if you're breastfeeding, or little chunks of anything in there. It is full on just wet, like you just poured poop colored water into the diaper. If they have that more than once, it's very easy for babies to get dehydrated, so you're going to want to talk to your pediatrician about that. If you notice any mucus in their stool, almost like snot or like boogers, but it's in their poop, especially if it's more than once. Sometimes you might actually see that because they've got a cold and it's, they're swallowing it and then it makes its way through the digestive tract and you see it in their poop. But if you see it more than once, you're going to want to call your doctor. If you see any signs of dehydration, baby is excessively sleepy, having any difficulty, like they used to have 5 wet diapers, now they have 1 a day. Those are all things that you're going to want to talk to your doctor about. The minute you leave the hospital, this is your baby's new normal. And any significant changes from there, you're going to want to call your pediatrician. They're so used to talking to new moms because there's so much that could go wrong, and they would rather you check in with them to be safe and know the baby's healthy than the other way around. So Another big thing, obviously, if for whatever reason baby cuts themselves or gets cut or gets a nick or a bruise or anything like that, you're going to want to call your pediatrician's office. I know nobody plans to drop their baby. Everyone is trying to be super careful, but it happens. And so if that happens, if you drop your baby or if baby, has any kind of fall, I know a parent, I know this sounds totally crazy too, a parent who put their baby in their car seat and left the hospital and forgot that the car seat was on the roof of the car. Thank God they stopped and realized it and put their baby in the car. But can you imagine? I mean, they were just so sleep deprived and just totally like freaking out. And it was like they thought their husband did it and he didn't. And it was just like, oh my God. So these things can happen. So if at any point baby has like a little tumble, you're going to want to talk to your pediatrician. Or anytime baby's bleeding, whether it's from their umbilical cord site, their circumcision site, maybe they had a vaccination, and it's more than like a drop of blood or it doesn't stop when you put pressure on it, you're going to want to talk to your pediatrician. Babies are small, they don't have a ton of blood, so I'm going to keep an eye on that. For your umbilical cord, that's going to dry up and fall off on its own in 7 to 14 days. If it's anytime it's bleeding, if there's redness around the area, if it's smelly, if baby is really sensitive in that area, or if you see any pus, or like I said, any kind of like boogery type, like mucus coming from that area, you'd want to talk to your doctor. Circumcision, same thing. Any blood, any persistent redness after the first few days, yellow discharge, fever over 100.4, swelling after the first day, like significant swelling, any fluid-filled sores that are like crusty, you'd want to let your doctor know about, or any difficulty peeing. So these are all signs that the circumcision needs some attention by a doctor. We also mentioned jaundice. So again, all babies get jaundice. It usually moves from head to toe. When they're leaving the hospital, maybe it's down to their chest area, and the next morning it's down to their belly, and they're fine and they're still eating. No problem, nothing to worry about. Let's say you leave the hospital, it's just their head that looks a little bit jaundiced. The next morning at home, you wake up, baby looks like bright orange practically. It's not just a light yellow, it's like a really deep color. It's very obvious that they're jaundiced and it's their whole body all of a sudden. That would be a pretty significant change, and you would want to tell your pediatrician about that. So make sure that you kind of know their baseline when they leave the hospital. And again, especially if baby is excessively sleepy or has a lot fewer wet diapers than they did in the hospital or the day before, you're going to want to call your pediatrician. That can all be signs that the jaundice is getting worse. Another big thing is thrush. Thrush is a yeast infection, essentially. It's really just annoying to treat because it can be passed easily between mom's nipples if you're breastfeeding and baby's mouth. So if you notice any white patches on the inside of baby's mouth, or you have like fluid, you have like sores, painful sores on your breast, those can be signs of thrush. It is treatable, like very easily treatable. The thing that's annoying is that, again, you can pass it back and forth. So you're going to want to talk to pediatrician or even your OBGYN, but you're both probably going to need treatment for that. And it's very common. It does happen. So keep that in mind. I actually had a friend who just happened to stop by a few weeks after she had the baby, just to visit. And she was like, oh, I'm having trouble breastfeeding. It was like showing me her nipples. And like the minute I took a look inside baby's mouth, I was like, you have thrush. She was like, oh my God, thank God. It's been a week. I've been like dealing with this, struggling. She had no idea that what was going on, and she didn't think that it was related to baby in any way. She thought she needed a lactation consultant, and so she was on like a waiting list to see the lactation consultant. So thrush can happen, and it's quite painful and annoying for you. So some of the other things to look for is generally baby's digestion. So if you notice, we talked about this in another live about poops. Lime green frothy poop like algae can be a sign that your baby has a stomach bug. If your baby has their first cold, we're planning to be doing a live on baby's first cold and what to expect with that. So keep your eyes peeled on that one. Any kind of black coffee grounds or meconium type poop, but it's after they've had meconium. So now it's like 2-3 weeks later, they've had their transition poop, they've had their regular breastfed poop, and now all of a sudden they have a black tarry or like a coffee ground poop. That can be a sign of internal bleeding in the digestive tract somewhere that you'd want a pediatrician to see them for. One of the other things is any kind of red poop. So you might have a red tinged poop or with red flecks, but it's normal otherwise. It's a normal breastfed poop. That can indicate a milk protein allergy. So maybe baby's allergic to dairy and you're a big cheese lover. So anytime you have like what seems to be blood in the stool, you're going to want to talk to your pediatrician. Another type of bloody stool is a bloody diarrhea. That can be quite serious. It's a sign of a very serious bacterial infection. You're going to want to talk to your pediatrician immediately. Another one is like a red currant jelly type of poop, and it kind of it looks like a congealed fat, or you know, we all know at Thanksgiving and then the day after, you know, you've had turkey in the gravy and there's kind of that layer of fat on the top of the gravy after it's solidified. If you see that but it's red in your baby's diaper, call your doctor right away. And then lastly, if they have like a white chalky type clay type, like a dried out Play-Doh, that can be a sign that they're having some issues with their liver or their gallbladder. So all of these are things that you're going to want to talk to your pediatrician about. We mentioned the diarrhea before. Also chronic constipation. So if your kiddo is constantly constipated or straining to poop or going several days without pooping and then having what seems to be very painful poop, that's something you want to talk to your pediatrician about. It could just be that your baby needs to have a little bit more hydration throughout the day. So things to keep an eye out for. So that's all the content that I've got for you guys today. I hope that it's been really helpful. I'm open to questions. If anyone has any questions on the content I've provided or on anything really, I'm here for you. So allowing time for questions. While I wait for questions to kind of roll in, I will mention that next week we are doing baby's first food, and that's going to be with Jessica Boscanari. I hope I said her name right. So Jessica Boscanari is one of our, she's coming to us from Healthy Fab Fit Moms. She is a health professional. I believe she's a personal trainer as well, and she is very in she's a mom of 2 and expecting her 3rd soon. Yeah. So she's going to guest blog for us next week, and she's going to be doing baby's first foods and how that works. So that's for moms of kids who are 4 to 6 months old. So that's when you start introducing first foods. But anytime, you know, moms, if you're 3 or 4 months old and you're trying to you know, get prepared for feeding baby their first food. We would love to have you join us on that live, bring all of your questions, things like that. So that is going to be next week, which I believe is the 22nd of March. So it's going to be a great session. I'm very much looking forward to hearing what Jessica has to say. So please join us for that. And if there are any questions, again, I haven't seen any scroll through. I guess I'm just very thorough with my topics. So if you're watching afterwards and you have any questions, would love to still have you write a comment. We do check back occasionally periodically to review those comments and answer your questions. So if you're seeing this after the fact, if you're getting this through our email blast that we've done some content and you're interested in hearing more, we would love to hear your questions, and I will answer them as well. So again, give folks another moment or two. One of the other things I will mention is in a few weeks, I think it's at the end of the month, we're doing a Facebook Live and a huge giveaway. So don't forget to subscribe, join us. You're not going to want to miss it. There's going to be $7,000 worth of prizes up for grabs per person, and there's 2 winners. So it's going to be huge. It's like just groundbreaking stuff that's happening. So much free stuff happening with that giveaway. You're not going to want to miss it. So it doesn't look like there's any questions today, so I really appreciate you guys joining me. I appreciate Maria for tuning in. She's tuning in from Champaign, Urbana. We've got Ashley and Lorna and Melissa. Hi Melissa, you share the same name. So thank you guys again for joining me. And if you have any other mamas out there who need to see this, don't forget to share and like us because this content is for everyone. So thank you all again for joining us. I'm going to stay indoors because, as you can see, I'm in Boston and we got hit with all that crazy weather. And so I'm going to be staying inside nice and warm away from that snow. I cannot wait for spring. So I will see you guys in a few weeks for when I host live next. But next week you'll be seeing Jessica. Jessica is doing baby's first food. So thanks again for tuning in. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.